Hello, welcome to another little tutorial. Today we're going to be talking about the little synthesizer that comes with Reaper, and we're going to be talking also about sequencing of that synthesizer in Reaper. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to make a new track. There are two ways to kind of get to the same thing, but I'll show you both ways. One is you can insert virtual instrument on new tracks. You get a track, insert virtual instrument on new track. And here are all of the basically plug-in synths that you have on your computer. I have maybe a couple more or different ones at least than the ones that you do. If you wanted to just see, the ones that come with Reaper, if you remember, it says Kakos after it. So you can just look for that, and that's ReaSynth. That also has the cute REA thing in front of it, so ReaSynth, and push OK. And now we have this little box. It's got some stuff. We'll talk about the stuff in 1 second, but I'm just going to exit out of here. Okay, so how do I hear it? Good question. You go to View, and you go to Virtual MIDI Keyboard. Or Option or Alt if you're on a PC, I think. B, that toggles it on and off. Okay. Okay, so you should hear that. Just kind of sounds very simple, very sine-y, like a sine wave. Very, probably as boring as it can get, but it is for certain a synth sound. So what is this? Virtual MIDI keyboard. MIDI, what is MIDI? MIDI is an acronym for Musical Instrument Digital Interface. And it's not really a sound. Some people will say like MIDI sound. MIDI is just a communication protocol. So when you have a keyboard and you boop, hit it, or a drum machine and you boop, you hit it, it's sending little data, and that's kind of triggering the sound in a variety of ways. That's kind of what that is if you see MIDI keyboard or MIDI anything else, MIDI sequencing, etc. Okay, so let's see what we can do to make this sound more interesting. So I'm gonna click the FX button again, and that'll bring up our ReaSynth again. So here we have a bunch of sliders. We have volume, we have tuning, we have attack, decay, sustain, release, and then the wave shape. So this is, all this part is doing is changing the envelope, this is changing the tuning, and this is changing the timbre, okay? So we'll start at the top. Tuning is pretty obvious. So I'm hitting the same note, but obviously it's not the same pitch or frequency. So that's kind of that. I'm just gonna leave that at 0 because I don't need it to be detuned. I want it to sound, I don't know, true to a normal piano or something like that. Then we have the attack, decay, sustain, release, and this controls the envelope. So we talked about envelope very briefly before, and here is an envelope. ADSR is kind of how we often simplify this. So attack, decay, sustain, release. And this is the shape of the note, basically, of the amplitude of the note. So when you hit the key, so if I were to hit this key in real life or on my computer, there's a ramp up to attack, and then a slight ramp down, just kind of sounds natural, and that's the decay. And then the sustain is basically for how long you hold the key, and then when you take the key, when you take your finger off the key, then there's a release. So you can change the shape to be whatever you want. You can have a really slow attack, or really quick attack, or have a long release. So I'll show you a little bit of that. You're probably mostly going to be playing with attack and release, so we'll just mostly focus on that. So here's our sound. If I make the attack time longer, say really long, you can hear that that is not just a quick thing. It is now taking a while to get to that climax, that highest point. There's lots of uses for having a long attack time. We'll keep it like here. And release. So same thing, if you just ramp up the release, I hit the button, and then I release. Okay, I take my finger off the key, and just keeps going. Lots of reason to use that as well. It's kind of like the sustain pedal. You just ramp up the release. So it might be a little much, so we'll back it off just a bit. Okay, and so this is automatically just kind of a little more pure, it's a little signy. But we can throw in all of these other waveforms if we want. So we have the square, and the square sounds a little more rough. We can also change the pulse width of the square wave, which here's kind of at one end of the spectrum, and here's at the other end of the spectrum. You can kind of hear that. Just changes the timbre a little bit. Maybe like the fullness versus the hollowness or something like that too. The square wave is like often used, it's used in a lot of contexts, but 8-bit music kind of comes to mind. So then we have the sawtooth, you can throw that in there. You can just put a little bit, if you just want a little bit of edge, and then triangle. Maybe a mix of many things. It kind of sounds nice. And then you can throw in an extra sine. If you want to round it out a bit more, just beef it up. And then the cool thing is you can detune this extra sine. So here's the extra sine wave, and here is, it's just random. Ooh, it sounds a little rough. Maybe the opposite direction. That's kind of fun. Yeah, okay, cool. So I like that. I changed some of the envelope to meet my needs, and I kind of changed the shape a little bit, or the wave shape, to kind of make something that sounded appropriate for either whatever I like or whatever I plan to make. So, all right, so we can play this. And we can also play it with the keyboard if we don't want to play with the mouse. You can see that there are letters underneath here. So maybe I make a little riff. Okay, so now I want to record that. There are a couple ways that you can record this. You can record it real time, as in like you perform it on your little typing keyboard. Or you can paint it in. So I'll show you first how to record it in real time, because sometimes it's easier to do that first and then start to add things and move things around. So first I'm going to see what 120 BPM sounds like. So I'm going to turn on my metronome up here. I think I'm going to make it a little bit slower. So I'm going to go down to the BPM here and change it to 110. Okay. I'm going to practice just a second. Maybe I'll change that last note on the second time. Okay, all right, I've done it, it sounds fine. So now I'm going to do it for real. I'm going to for real record it. So I'm going to push this button. Now the way I typically like to record is I just give it a couple bars empty, just so I can make sure that I am on the beat as much as I can be. So you're gonna see me do that. I'll probably let it go for two bars or so, and then I'll play my little riff. Okay, so let's see. Make sure you have the MIDI keyboard actually selected, or you won't be able to click anything, just like I did. Okay, that's fine. Not amazing, but fine. You can save your little MIDI if you want. I'm not going to do that for right now. It'll just be here and be saved in the project. if you don't do that. That's just an extra step. Okay, so we have all this empty space. I'm just gonna kind of clean this up a little bit because we don't need it. And now what we have here is a little MIDI region. So if we double click this, whoa, here we are. Where are we? We're in the little MIDI region. So I'm gonna zoom in a little bit for ease. And here we have this grid, and this grid is divided. So here is the second, third, and fourth, or first through four measures. And you can see that we have these lines just like normal, and because I am not very good at being exactly on the beat, you can see that my notes in performance were kind of all over the place. They were mostly early. I wonder why that is. But we can fix this. We can fix this in one of two ways. So we can either move them by holding and dragging. That, works out pretty well, I would say. Or we can do that. We can select everything, and you can do that by either Command A, or you can double click, or right click or two finger click, and you can just select that way. So I selected that way. And now when I go up to the top, I see this thing. It's a big Q. It's called for quantize. I'm gonna push that Q. Whoa, I pushed that Q and it just moved everything onto the line. Amazing. So you could say use grid, quantize all events, or selected events, depending on what you're trying to do. Position, and then okay. Now, if for some reason it doesn't quantize the way you expect it to, you can go down to here, and here we can change where it's going to snap to. So these little fractions are referring to basically like the divisions of the bar. So if you're familiar with any music theory, half note, quarter note, eighth note, 16th note, 32nd note, 64th note, 128th note. In my class when we were doing the Alicia Keys remixes, we kind of talked a little bit about this, and we kind of talked about how these bars worked. So hopefully you can recall that. If not, then just play around with it and choose larger. If you're trying to like snap to really specific things, really smaller nuanced things, then I would go to like 16th or 32nd note. Probably not 64th though. It's just a little excessive. But you can also snap to these larger numbers too, and that that might actually help you just like start somewhere. It'll just snap to kind of the bigger, darker bars. Okay, so that's pretty good, right? So now what? Okay, well, first of all, oops. First of all, I'm just gonna move all these over to the beginning of the first bar so that we have now 4 bars of whatever. We can extend these if we want so that they're all like a little longer. So like this, for instance, sonically, the sound, the release goes through this whole bar. So maybe I actually just like want to pull that over a little bit more. Same thing with this one. And then maybe I want to add some harmony. So what we can do is we can now start painting in some other notes, or we can move these notes around. So maybe if we listen to this again, I decide that I don't really like this last note here. It's like do, 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 do. Maybe I want this to be something like that. So maybe it sounds better that way. Okay, well, that doesn't necessarily sound better, but it is different at the very least. I'm actually gonna move this back over because I liked it better. Okay, so you can also add another note under it. So maybe I'll put this back to where it was, but I'll put like a nice little, what is this? It's an A. So maybe I'll put I don't know, D here. Maybe that'll sound better. Yeah, it's something for sure. And you can, once again, start moving these things. You can actually shift them off the beat. And that could be interesting. Just give it a little bit more life. Okay. And so instead of typing it in real time, you could just start from here, figure out what tempo you're using, or, you know, if you're not really keeping to the beat, that's totally fine. Then you don't have to use that. And then you can set that, you know, set whatever else you need, and you can just start like painting them in one by one, but just clicking and dragging. So this is fine for now. I'm gonna exit out. Boop. And now we have this block here that we can start to copy and paste if we want. Copy and paste this a couple times and maybe put some stuff underneath it, maybe like some drums or another synth line or something like that. So copy and paste and paste and paste. And you can also just loop it too. So now we can add another one if we want. Add drums, whatever. So that's kind of the basics of sequencing with this built-in synthesizer. There's a lot of other synthesizers you could use if you wanted to, little plugins. You can go to KVR Audio and find some. There's also a couple that I like particularly. I'll show you one. So I'll insert another virtual instrument track, or we'll do it the other way. I'll insert a new track, and then we'll go to FX. And here are my other ones. I kind of like Dext. I mentioned this in a previous lecture. It's got a lot of knobs and buttons, and I love knobs and buttons. But the cool thing about this, yes, there's a lot of knobs and buttons. However, there's also a lot of presets, and presets are fun because they give you some place to start. So you could just pick a preset like that, and you can start kind of playing with, just like, you just move some of this stuff around, you know, just start messing around. You're not gonna like destroy anything, you know what I mean? Sometimes it's fun to just like see what's going on, or see what you can do just by kind of farting around. See, now I have something that kind of sounds like, you know, it's automatically has like a harmony to it. Little intervals, it's kind of fun. So yeah, that's kind of what I would suggest to do. You can also use presets, but presets, especially if you find some good presets, and boy howdy, I have found some good presets that I have done little to adjust. But it's always better to just like craft the sound that you want. And it will, one, usually make it more interesting. Sometimes presets are really interesting, but sometimes you can recognize them and then they're like a little less interesting, but maybe that's something you want to do. Maybe you're like, oh, Carly Rae Jepsen has a song that has this sound in it. I want to sound like her, or I want to make a reference to her or something, then totally maybe a reason to do that. But other than that, you know, just play around. And you can do the same dealio. You can start playing, or you can, and record it, or you can go to insert new MIDI item on the track. So that was insert new MIDI item. And then you can open this up and you can just start painting. And if you just want to hear that alone, then you have to mute it. Right, Heather? So that could be cool. I could, oops, copy that a couple times. Maybe do something kind of wacky like that. Yeah, that sounds good. That's kind of fun. Totally. Now, last thing, and this is kind of cool and also kind of important, is these little bars down here. So when you open up the MIDI region, you get these little bars. And these are essentially, it says velocity, and velocity is kind of a funny word, but it's basically, it imitates the weight, or I guess the force that you would put on the keys in order to, produce a sound. And if you've ever played a piano, you know that if you put a little bit more into it, you get like a louder, sharper sound. And if you are very gentle and depress the key, you get like the softer sound. So you can ramp this up and pull them down to imitate kind of that softness versus more forcefulness. So if I were to pull this down, like basically to nothing, maybe you can hear those differences. Not particularly on this instrument. I'll show you on this instrument. It'll be a little better. So this is like full force. So you can hear how that shapes the sound a little bit more. So, if you think about phrases, like oftentimes you might start at like a medium, and then you might like climax to something more forceful in the line, and then you might come down a little bit. So maybe something, if you want to shape the melodic phrase a little more, you might want to use these. But also if you want to have it sound more human and less like a little computer making sound, then playing with the velocity will also help you get that more human-like sound. So that brings us to the end of this intro to the synthesizer in Reaper and also sequencing that synthesizer. Hope you learned something. Bye.